During the astrology of the week of 30th November 2020 through 6th December 2020, it's a time where maybe the well-lit pathway is not well lit anymore. And we're entering this in-between zone. So we've got to be careful with exactly what we're putting into the world, because there may be these lasting ramifications. All right, so yeah, we're starting the week off here in the morning on Monday here in Central Europe, about 10:30 in the morning, with that lunar eclipse in Gemini. You can watch my video that I just released on the eclipse, where I really break down what I see is symbolically being called forth by the energy. But the main theme here was grief, loss, sadness, a sort of look back and an analysis of 2020, analytics, or this reflection that might be grief-inducing or triggering because of just how intense 2020 has been, how much loss we've suffered collectively. Remember, eclipses happen in twos or threes. And so this Monday lunar eclipse is the first in a series. We call it eclipse season, astrologers. It just means that the 2 or 3 eclipses that come together. And remember, because it's the lunar nodes, and as the sun travels near the node, every new moon is a solar eclipse, every full moon is a lunar eclipse if the sun and moon are close enough to those nodes. So what happens after Monday is that we're entering into this 2-week period between eclipses. You know, some people talk about the veil being thin during this period, where maybe we have a direct access to other realms. You know, there's a side to this eclipse season that requires engagement. I mean, life doesn't just shut down. Oh, there's eclipses, everything stops. No, life can sometimes even get more intense. The events of the outer reality can be brought to these dynamic climaxes or conclusions. You know, so when that's happening, we can get caught up in that. And it's very easy to get sort of separated or dislodged from that inner sanctum or that inner selfhood. Whatever time we can make, in spite of intensity happening around us, for that reflective moment here during this week is going to serve us well, even if, and it probably is for a lot of you out there, really intense and a lot happening and very dynamic. Later in the day, about 8 o'clock in the evening, the day of the eclipse on Monday, Mercury in the second to last degree of Scorpio, Saturn in the second to last degree of Capricorn, and they're meeting here. They're making this easygoing sextile where they can really exchange maybe in a beneficial way. What I'm thinking here, how I'm seeing this Saturn sextile Mercury, is that the words we speak can often have lasting implications. Think about in your life, you've probably relived moments where the words were said and they really pierced you, and they really left an indelible kind of mark. And so knowing the power of our language, the power of even like videos or tweets or the things we write and say, this 2-week period where the veil's thin, where things are maybe more intense for people, it's worthwhile to consider the implications of the words. And it can go both ways, right? You might want to be a little bit more careful so that you don't haphazardly wound someone. On the other hand, you know, you might want to use the time, this aspect and this eclipse energy, to maybe set things in more of a permanent, configuration. And this is the whole other side of eclipse delineation and astrological eclipse interpretation, is that one tradition says you really tone everything down and get really prayerful, and it's a time for submission. I tend to go with that tradition. Maybe it's more of a right-hand path. The other model, and this is in some of the tantric schools, there's some actually Western electional astrology that would say this, is that when you do things during eclipse, the energy can be so intense, the veil is so thin, that sometimes those actions that we take, those rituals, elections, sometimes people will elect with the moon near the north node. You see that, and maybe even during an eclipse. It can give it an even more profound and lasting feature. Like I said, for my electional astrologic work, I don't do anything during eclipses, and I stay out of the eclipse energy except for prayerful submission. I'm sort of more of a right-hand path guy. And so I think that eclipse tunnel period, what I'm calling the tunnel, that's a feature of it. Being very careful with what we say and do, because it can remain, whether it's the 6 months after this eclipse season until the next eclipse season, or maybe more permanently. You know, this is Mercury, communication, words, ideas, Saturn, longevity, old systems. And that's another way this aspect could be delineated too, is that we talk about old things. Ancient things may emerge. You may be reading ancient texts or thinking about old text from long ago. So this might be part of your eclipse energy, your eclipse moment, this big reflective phase. And with Mercury, there's always an analytical side. What are we going to analyze? Things that have happened. The other thing I wanted to say here is that Mercury and Saturn are both ruled by Saturn and Mars. Mercury, the domicile ruler, is Mars, the term ruler is Saturn, and Saturn, it's flipped. The domicile ruler is Saturn, and the term ruler is Mars. So you have this reference back to Mars. Mars is a player. This is why I think the care and concern and consideration is even more important, because words wound. We can pierce into deep, the deep recesses of another person by how we say things, how we phrase things. This martial component, I think, can risk that. So if you're getting into fights online, I would be deferential. I would pull back. I just think beware here with what we say, and the martial piercing, and then this Saturnian longevity. That's the great risk, especially during this sensitive tunnel period between eclipses. And just a little bit on this tunnel analogy, why I like it so much. You have the entry into a tunnel where and this is, by the way, I'm basing this on an experience I just had in Budapest. I was living in an area, and to go under the train tracks, I could walk through this tunnel, and it was a really creepy tunnel. It was really dark. There was graffiti everywhere. There was kind of strange people always around. But it was a great shortcut, and I would go through this tunnel and come out on the other side of town, and the other side of this neighborhood, and instead of going all the way around. And that's what I think these eclipse tunnels are, this period between, because we enter it on one side where it's sort of normal life as it's been operating. That first eclipse of eclipse season kind of gets us into this tunnel period, and it's dark in a tunnel. It's got to be artificial light. And this one in Budapest, it was like a light every 30 feet, so there was really, really dark areas. But eclipses, you remember, they change the nature of the lights. The sun and the moon are luminaries. The moon reflects the sun's light. The sun is that light generator. And so there is a sense of turning the light down during eclipses. And so that's what happens in a tunnel. And I think this is a nice analogy, right? The next step is unclear. We're uncertain of how to proceed. And that step-by-step model is the one that I also believe is very valuable during eclipse season. And just take it literally 1 hour at a time if you need to, certainly 1 day at a time. And just know that if things get dynamically intensified, if conditions are rapidly changing, sometimes all we can do is meet that next logical step, or that next intuited step. Just like if in a dark tunnel, it's just really step by step. So go with the step-by-step energy. Try not to see too far ahead. But that light at the end, that's the knowledge that by the end of December, when we get a full moon in Cancer, that full moon in Cancer will complete eclipse season. We'll be done with it by then. So that's the end point. And I think about the geopolitics right now, particularly the American election. I know it really feels settled on one level, and I still think it probably is, but that 14th December solar eclipse in Sagittarius happens very near the current president's nodal configuration in his nativity. And so there is some activation. There's some real activation there. And it happens near the Sibley, the USA natal chart in that first house, that solar eclipse. So I want to be cautious as we enter this tunnel period, just take things a day at a time. When we get to that other side in December, there might be some really differences that we haven't been able to foresee. And the other thing, some astrologers refer to this as the bardo, the land between dying and then being reborn. Some refer to it as a gateway, like you enter through a gate into a new land or a new piece of property, you traverse a border. So that's the tunnel, I think, can be part of that. Oh, and the other part of the tunnel is it can be a shortcut. Sometimes these eclipse seasons bring us into fate. They suck us into the future, into our fate. And that can be kind of like a wormhole. If the physics kind of bends space and time, and then the wormhole idea is that you can jump to something very far away by connecting it through this kind of shortcut of a hole. And that's how I think about this tunnel idea too. It is a shortcut. It's an efficient way to travel into our new realm and our new fate. So now let's go to Tuesday. This is the next day. About right around the same time, around 8 in the evening, Mercury enters Sagittarius. This is here in Central Europe, 8 in the evening. And this is big because Mercury, remember, has lingered in Scorpio. It went retrograde in those middle degrees of Scorpio, came back into Libra, went direct, and now it's been working its way for an elongated period here. This is the same sign that Mercury will be in during the Great Conjunction, during the solar eclipse. So we're going to have a Mercury and Sagittarius moment here for this big climax to 2020. Of course, we have to say this is the exile of Mercury. So Mercury has to now filter through Jupiter, which can sometimes be very uncomfortable. And the other thing is Mercury is going to be under the beams, meaning that we can't see Mercury in the sky because it's too close to the sun. That can subdue sometimes Mercury's ability to do mercurial things. Maybe the speaking just can't quite come, it's not as elegant. So I think this also fits with this eclipse tunnel theme of maybe turning down or turning inward or maybe buttoning the mouth. You know, sometimes it's better to not say anything at all. I found just why speak, you know. There's no reason to say something unless maybe I'm spoken to or unless it's absolutely necessary. Spiritual traditions, I've been on a bunch of silent meditation retreats. There is something to be said by turning down the words, letting thoughts pass like clouds and just trying to focus on maybe the heart or the body, you know, wisdom, higher level truth. And Mercury, the great question here is, how do we know what's true? How can we understand what's true? I think when Mercury comes into Sagittarius, it can demand, it can ask questions and kind of demand answers. You know, prove it. You say that's true, show me. And that's why there's tension here. You know, and when you call people out like that and ask for receipts, as they say, or ask for documents, sometimes that's not a very comfortable place. And it's not compatible sometimes. I mean, some of the greatest truths of our human realm are unarticulable, right? These are ineffable understandings and insights sometimes. They can only be felt, experienced, analyzed, you know, with other types of systems, not necessarily the mercurial thought forms, the Mercury, you know, brain model. These are heartfelt. Is a great, I love that adjective. It was a heartfelt conversation. We can feel with the heart. On the other hand, it's good to sometimes question authority, question a received truth and wisdom, and put it through that mercurial grill. You know, grill it with the questions and the analysis. So there might be a time for that here while Mercury is hitting these eclipse seasons. And I think about the turning of the age that we're entering into. Like, what is this age of Aquarius? What is this great destruction and then the reconstruction that people are saying will happen in 2021? Let's question it. Is that really what is best? Are the reforms that are suggested really what is going to work? You know, they could go two ways too here, that fanaticism can come in with Sagittarius. Sagittarius can sometimes be associated with really dogmatic fanaticism, both by political belief or by religious belief. As Mercury has to filter through Sagittarius, it's a little bit weaker here. I think there could be a risk of not asking questions, not challenging enough the received truth that is being kind of propagated in the system. So, you know, who's fanatical around you? Are you fanatical? Am I fanatical? What do I need to say, ease off of and realize, hey, this is a little bit of a dogmatic model. Sometimes with this, it's good to read the opposite. So I like saying, well, this is what I like, this is what I believe. And then if it's like in your social media feed, you see something that you really react to, oh, I hate that, click it, read it. Just read a little bit of it. And if it's disgusting still, yeah, you know, turn away from it. But it can be good to try on those other reality views, those other opinions. I've found it to be very useful because it at the minimum, it's going to help you understand where other people are coming from, people that you're living with in this you know, human community. You know, sometimes with this, it can be also just having faith and just trusting, right? Just trust things that maybe evidence of things unseen. I think that's a biblical line, but maybe that if you don't see the evidence, you can still like feel it, or just trust elders, wisdom teachers that point in that right direction. The moon enters Cancer on Wednesday early in the morning. This is on December 2nd, Wednesday early in the morning, and this is the last moon in Cancer where all three of those rulers are going to be together. All three of those rulers will be in their domiciles, making this dynamic cardinal T-square by sign. And the difference with this one, though, and it hasn't happened at all in this cycle, is that now both Saturn and Mars are moving direct. So they both have this direct motion, and they're both getting a little bit stronger right now. It's just going to be even more intense. The moon opposite Saturn, that's always rough. You know, the body has to be you know, placed under conditions of more austerity. You know, the physical body doesn't like that. It can be good for the body, but I mean, that's like choosing to undergo austerity for some kind of spiritual goal. Most of the time we want a hot shower, we want enough blankets and pillows, we want to have enough water to drink and food to eat. That's how we kind of our natural state, our natural tendency. That Saturn opposition can challenge that. The other thing is that Mars from that square, that overcoming square from Aries, it can dislodge our ability to have stasis and rest. You know, Mars wants to move and separate. So I think there's a risk during this period of just not really having that comforts that you might be used to. This is again Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week. Geopolitical movement here. This transit has been on my radar for a very long time. There's some historical precedent for this triggering up geopolitical chaos. So I don't think this time it's going to necessarily happen. I'm not really predicting that because Saturn is ruling everything here in the sense that it's in superior position to Mars, so it can really restrain that martial tendency, and it's strong in Capricorn. So I'm still thinking that's how things are going to unfold, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe there's a tenor or a genuflect towards this kind of geopolitical situation, maybe turning sour or south. And I've been reading the news lately. There's indications maybe in the Middle East there's some buildup. Concerning, to be frank. So once we get to the end of this week, I hope my next weekly astrology video, nothing will have happened that's big. And so that's what I'm really rooting for. The next thing that happens here, Saturday, 5th of December, 3 in the morning here in Central Europe, that moon enters Leo. It'll be a sense of relief for one. The moon safe from these sign-based hard aspects to Saturn and Mars, which is what I prioritize in all of my work. So I think this Leo moon transit, while a come down somewhat from the Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday difficulty, there's still now this preview. So this weekend we might have a little bit of a preview of what the solar eclipse will bring. You know, and I think so. Look for that as your solar eclipse story starts trying to arrive here. You know, you might think about the sector of your chart that Sagittarius is in. You might get a little bit of a preview here this weekend for what the 14th December climax for that story for you will bring. You know, the moon's waning again, and this is a turn down phase of the moon. So I think this theme of reflection comes back to us here. The lunar eclipse has happened, now we're waning into the solar eclipse. You know, you might want to reflect on what is true, what's your core sense of identity, you know, and I think that for me, it always starts with that kind of heart-centered spiritual flame. This is the flame of the soul, you might say. Ego accoutrements can be added onto this inner flame, but that's what I'll be trying to reflect on probably. You know, and if you're not someone who's partial to, you know, religious terminology or spiritual terms like soul or something like that, you might just want to think about the perceiver, you know, Descartes, I think, therefore I am. This idea that you do have this mind that's so powerful that can envision and imagination and perception. Where is that coming from, right? It's the human power, the power of the human, you know, creature. So, you know, reflecting on that a little bit, how are you going to deploy that power later on in 2021? This might be a time just to get, you know, efficiently pruned here, cutting away things of the identity that aren't, you know, serviceable anymore, and kind of getting it efficiently pruned, maybe in fighting shape, something like that for next year, getting it in shape to really function well. Enjoy the Leo moon this weekend. That Cancer moon is going to be rough, and early in the week, I think that our words can be very, very powerful. So let's watch our words. All right. Time for a tarot reading. Maybe we'll get a little bit more going here with the themes of this week by pulling some tarot cards. Nothing like pulling some tarot cards, is there? Nothing like it. One of my favorite parts of reading tarot and working with it is that anticipation. That's I think what drives. It's almost that high that has me keep continuing to come back. Is that anticipation? It's like, what are the cards going to say? And you never know. It's random, you know. And so there's always this sense of curiosity. And then once the card emerges, it feels special because it's a random process. So there's a reason why did this random card appear? What is this card trying to say? And so the curiosity of what's going to come drives an openness to hear the symbol, I think. You know, it's almost like it's special. And that's why the randomization is just so powerful when we do divination. All right, let's get the first card. 7 of Swords. So again, an air sign. That's been coming up a lot in the readings here this week that I've done. This is a decan ruled by the moon. This is the moon's decan in that last decan of Aquarius, those last 10 degrees. It's funny, I just had a conversation on Twitter about 2022 and 2023 when Saturn will be transiting there. And I think with the new age that's coming, with this Saturnian feature, the destructive 2020, then this building back, I think that by this time in 2022, 2023, there will be a sense of the new rules that society will come up with, that society is going to be enforcing, really, in order to bring the collective through the crisis we're in, and then set up new rules for how the society will function. And our powerful people are already talking about this. You've probably been reading articles about it, plans for how to set the world up. And the health crisis is just one kind of trigger for this whole other set of prerogatives for digitization, technological advancement. They call it the fourth industrial revolution. That really jibes well with the Aquarian energy and the great conjunction being in Aquarius, and then this being the mutation conjunction, where now we will have only air sign ruled Jupiter and Saturn conjunctions for, I think it's 160 years, well over 100 years. I think it's 2060 is the next one that shifts out, so it's maybe 140 years. But I want to go back to the body side of it, because the moon, this is a moon ruled decan. And remember what the moon represents: the body, the mother, the nurturing side, and then the home environment. And it can also represent foresight. You see this in the ancient texts. And I think that there might be something about, like I was saying in the talk earlier, that with that darkened tunnel, sometimes we're not able to see beyond that next step. I feel like with Saturn and Moon in this position, it's really encouraging us to kind of maybe not make decisions in a way, not be so convinced that we know what will happen even 2 weeks out. So you might want to hold back on making long-term plans or decisions during this eclipse season. That's usually how I operate anyway. I don't do elections or anything during eclipse season. I try to just tone down and submit and pray. So that's what I see here. I think this could be pointing to that Cancer moon, that transit that I was just speaking about too. Cancer opposite Saturn, and the difficulty that might come to the body, the discomfort we might be in. That's also a time to maybe not be as decisive and just kind of endure discomfort and try to get through that to get on some more solid footing and more comfortable footing. Let's see here, second card. Yeah, Seven of Spades, not the easiest card. I mean, the spades are often, you might find more difficult cards in the spades or swords suit of the tarot. I think it has to do with the mind, and the mind being kind of the great trickster. The mind is kind of the great oppressor. So much suffering arises in the mind. It's the thoughts we tell ourselves, the visions that we allow to be in our, our thought forms that we choose to entertain. So, maybe that's part of this too, is get out of the mind a little bit. What I was talking about earlier with Mercury being under the beams of the sun, maybe it's not a time for thinking as much. All right, second card. Let's pull it. This is, Temperance. Wow, Temperance. This is so apropos. This is Sagittarius. This corresponds to Sagittarius and the correspondence system. And this is where that solar eclipse will be in Sagittarius. It's where the sun is right now. And I think it really just tells me that the ego, I know that's a buzzword people hate, but the sun does represent the organ of mental perception, according to Vedius Valens. It's the self and the perceiver, right? The kind of the spiritual self, whereas Mercury is more of the mind and the thought form. This is more of our spiritual kind of identity that we do then build on, and we construct an ego around. What this is really telling me, I feel like, is that we're in it, man. And this is the future position of a reading. First card is past and present. The second card is the future. I think this is really underscoring the whole tunnel analogy I was mentioning, and that we have to get through this next solar eclipse to come to the other side. I think the solar eclipse will be quite potent, maybe even more so than the lunar eclipse, because Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is in Capricorn, just finishing its time in Capricorn, all of the challenges of that Jupiter in Capricorn. Let's just here look at the symbol of the card. I mean, Temperance, it is a balancing of waters. This is a card about how to kind of balance things out. And maybe it's referring to the wisdom and truth that, and trying to come off of our fanatical attachments and maybe get into more reasonable models of how we understand reality. Some people say belief is the enemy of true knowing or true understanding. And so sometimes that belief can really get in the way. I think this is saying, let's just tone it down. Let's wear our ideas like a loose garment. And I think when we get to the other side of eclipse season, it's time maybe we'll put back a hat on, or maybe kind of enter the world with a little bit more confidence. But I just don't think that's the time for it right now. So that's the tarot reading. Thank you for being here. I enjoy just exploring this with you. And as always, you can book astrology and tarot readings with me, sjanderson144.com. I look forward to reading for you. And have a lovely and wonderful week. And yeah, this week with that Cancer transit with the moon, I think is one that's quite potent. Blessings to you as you move through this week. Take care, and we'll talk soon.